We're excited for you guys to learn a little bit more about our new Death Valley and Joshua Tree National Park tour that we'll be having both in March and November of 2022. My name is Ben Sander. I'm the Associate Director of Vendor Relationships, and I've spent the last 10 years building and designing national park trips like the one we'll be talking about today. I have a background in ecotourism and environmental education. Before I worked for Austin Adventures, I was at National Parks Conservation Association for 7 years, the largest nonprofit to protect our national parks, where I had the opportunity to visit over 140 national park sites, including 47 of our national parks, including the 3 sites that we'll be visiting today, Joshua Tree, Death Valley, and Mojave. So just to give you a little overview of what we're going to be covering today, this trip is in Southern California. You can see both Los Angeles and Las Vegas on this map. This trip does run 2 directions. It goes from Las Vegas over to Death Valley, then Death Valley down to Mojave, Mojave down to Joshua Tree, and then ends in Palm Springs, which is just south of the park. And then we also do it in the reverse order. So from Palm Springs to Joshua Tree up to Mojave, Mojave over to Death Valley, and then we'll end in Vegas. So a lot of great opportunities to explore both Las Vegas and Palm Springs, either before or after this trip. So we'll be doing this trip from north to south. So we will be starting in Death Valley National Park for this presentation. This is one of my favorite parks because you have such a unique mixture of really tall peaks, these really cool canyons, and then also these saltwater flats that actually lie 282 feet below sea level. And from that area, you can actually see those peaks that reach over 11,000 feet, like Telescope Peak. So the first thing we want you guys to be able to do is get into one of these really cool slot canyons. If you've never been in a slot canyon, look at the picture in the center, which is actually from a trip that I took to Death Valley. These really cool rock formations on either side of you. You take this trail down the middle, you really get a sense of how the water can just carve itself through these slot canyons to make these really intricate designs in the rocks that will be around you. That following day, we'll take a sightseeing tour because some of the best things to do in Death Valley are up a little bit higher so you can get these really great vantage points, really great photo opportunities to take pictures of Death Valley, those colors and hues on the rocks like you see on the left side of this presentation. That's a view from probably either Dante's View or Zabriskie Point, and the colors are just constantly changing. Like I said, a lot of great photo opportunities on this morning that we go around these 3 points, Dante's View, Zabriskie Point, Artist Palette. You can see from the last one, Artist Palette is very well known for its great vantage points. Sometimes you'll actually see artists and painters hanging out there. We'll also walk that evening amongst the salt flats at Badwater Basin, which is the picture on the lower right. You see there's a really easy boardwalk out there, and then you end up right on the saltwater flats. 200 square miles of them. We'll spend a little bit of time walking around the salt flats. You guys can get a sense of this really unique area of Death Valley before we hop back in the vans and head to our hotel for a little bit of a break before we get down into the sand dunes that evening, hopefully right around sunset time, depending on how the flow of the day goes. And these sand dunes are really interesting. They're called the mesquite sand dunes because they are dotted with some mesquite trees. We'll have the opportunity to walk on top of the sand dunes and get a little sense of how these sand dunes formed, despite that we have this huge desert around them. So Death Valley is really interesting, as I mentioned, with sand dunes, with these huge towering cliffs, these amazing canyons that we'll hike through, as well as all these great vantage points. So we really try to cover all the great highlights of Death Valley over the 2 days that we'll spend in the park. From there, we're going to make our way just a little bit south. Mojave National Preserve sits between Death Valley and Joshua Tree National Park. And this was protected because it has such a diversity of both flora and fauna. It's actually home to 3 of the 4 major North American deserts, the Mojave, Great Basin, and Sonoran. So that means that we're going to have a lot of opportunities to see different types of plants in different areas of this preserve as we drive through the preserve. And through that drive, we're going to make a couple stops. A first stop will be to get up a little bit higher. It's not a real strenuous hike. It's about 500 feet of elevation change. It will get you up to this peak and you can look over all of the Mojave National Preserve and just get a sense of why this place is so unique and why the National Park Service is protecting this area. Through our drive, we'll be driving through a lot of ecologically diverse areas, including these mountain ranges that will be around us, dry riverbeds. Sometimes those aren't so dry, depending in the spring if we get some rain, some huge mesas, towering sand dunes. So right at the end of our time in Mojave, we'll go and have an opportunity to hike amongst the sand dunes in the southern part of the preserve. And then you'll notice there's a lot of historic volcanic activity in this area. We'll drive by some cinder cones, some domes, as you see in the middle of this slide, as well as some lava flows and some rock, old volcanic rock that you can walk on. And there's some rocks that they've dated back to 2.5 billion years old in this park. As I mentioned, because of all these different deserts that we'll be going through, you're actually going to see everything from Joshua trees to yuccas to junipers and pinyon pines, and hopefully some wildlife as well. But this national preserve is really huge and quite rustic. This is just going to be a really good opportunity to have an amazing scenic drive with a couple stops to get out and explore this preserve by foot. So then we end up in Joshua Tree National Park, and we spend about 2 days exploring this park as well. These Joshua trees that will be surrounded by throughout the first day of this trip on the park. Some of them date back to 200 years old, but some are as old as 500 years old. So, you'll see a large diversity of how big these trees are. Some of them have multiple branches. Just everyone oftentimes are compared to different types of human arms and legs, and they can look very human-like when you go by them. So we're going to have a lot of great opportunities to stop and get up close to those Joshua trees. We'll also be making a stop at the Cholla Cactus Garden, which is the picture on the bottom right, which I took as a storm was blowing in, as you can see. This is one of the 15 species of cacti that exist in Joshua Tree, including the very famous 20-foot tall Actulia cactus, which is more in the southern part of this park. Then we're going to cover up some other major highlights of this park, and one of those is the cultural history of Joshua Tree National Park. This is actually a homestead right in the middle of this park, where there was a historic dam still there, as well as a really great opportunity to see one of the oldest gold ore crushing mills in the United States. This is a huge gold area, all the way through the mid 1900s. And that mill has a lot of great mine shafts that you can still see, as well as the main mill that's still there. And right around that area is amazing rock formations. They're huge. You can climb up on top of them. We'll walk around the base of Skull Rock, which is a picture on the left. You'll just be really blown away by these rock formations. It's really hard to explain and visualize until you're there on the ground. But we have a couple different hikes that we're going to take you on around these rock formations, which are also dotted by, as you can see, some sagebrush, some cacti, and some Joshua trees as well. And believe it or not, there's actually a couple palm oases, both on the north end of this park and the south end of this park. And we'll have an opportunity to visit one of those palm oases either at the beginning of your trip if you're going from south to north, or in this case, at the end of your trip before we drop you off in Palm Springs. And this palm oasis it's so surreal to have spent multiple days in the desert, and you come across 49 palm trees just out of the blue. And it's amazing to come over that cliff and just see those 49 palms below you. And if we have some time, we'll get down into the oasis itself. And the other interesting part about Joshua Tree is the meeting of the Mojave and Colorado deserts. As I mentioned when we were talking about Mojave National Preserve, very different types of plants grow on either side of this desert. And those two deserts meet at the Cholla Cactus Garden, which is that picture on the right. So you'll just see a lot of different varieties of trees in this park, a lot of different cacti. This also is a fairly small park, actually, in total space. So we'll actually have a pretty good opportunity to see some wildlife throughout this part of the trip, but they are pretty small and a lot of them are nocturnal. So really great opportunity to see 3 of our national park sites across this trip. So a few more details about the trip itself. As I mentioned, it goes from either Palm Springs to Las Vegas or Las Vegas to Palm Springs. It's 6 days and 5 nights. This is one of our adult-only trips, so those that are over the age of 16. It runs March 13th through 18th, as well as March 20th through the 25th, as well as some dates in November. We picked these dates because of it being cooler out, because as the name Death Valley might indicate to you, it does get pretty hot pretty quickly once you get into May, June, and certainly July. The really great thing is this is a kind of moderately active trip. We'll have multiple hikes and walks each day that combine to be about 3 to 6 miles a day. So none of them are that long at one point. We'll have a couple 1 mile hikes. We'll have a couple 2 mile hikes. I think our longest hike is just over 3 miles at one time. And a lot of them don't have much elevation change. So we're talking most hikes are under 500 feet of elevation change. We have one hike where we have 1,000 feet of elevation change. So as I mentioned, we'll be rolling through all 3 of these national park sites across these 6 days, but giving you plenty of opportunities to see the amazing highlights of each of these park sites. Beyond what I've talked about already, one of the great things about this trip is every evening you're going to have really great stargazing opportunities because there's very little ambient light in Death Valley and Joshua Tree, which are both international dark sky parks. So it'll give you as many opportunities as we can for you to get out and do some stargazing, hopefully get that app on your phone that will allow you to identify the different constellations after we have dinner each night. We'll be staying at a couple of great places right in the middle of Death Valley National Park and just to the north of Joshua Tree National Park on this trip. You have a set of nodule guides who will walk you through this biodiverse region of Southern California. And then obviously you have an opportunity to spend some extra time in Las Vegas or Palm Springs, either at the beginning or end of this trip. And we do include all the meals on this trip except for one night when you're in 29 Palms. Lets you have a night on your own to explore the small, unique, kind of funky town of 29 Palms and grab some dinner on your own. So there's a couple of pictures of the 2 places we're going to be staying. You can see it is a true oasis at Ranch at Death Valley. The 2 nights will be there. And then at 29 Palms, where you either spend 2 or 3 nights. This is a really, as you can kind of tell from the photo, unique kind of California desert accommodation. It's got adobes in it. It's got kind of more typical motel rooms. We have a good combination of rooms that'll give you a really cool sense of this town and this region, and a really nice pool here, as well as a nice on-site restaurant. If you want to learn more about this tour, certainly you can give us a call, shoot us an email. You can also get on our website. We certainly have a whole itinerary on there, the dates, and you can download a PDF itinerary of the trip for your reference. Make sure to follow us on both Facebook and Instagram so you can see photos from both this trip as well as many of our other trips as we make our way through the 2022 season. And there's always a few questions about this trip, so I just wanted to run through some typical questions I get about Joshua Tree and Death Valley. Main one I get is about activity level. So let's say you're in your 60s, you're pretty active, but you may have bad knees. You know, is this a trip that's for you? And I would certainly say yes. As I mentioned, there's not a lot of elevation change to these hikes. None of them are super long. You'll have a lot of opportunities where you're just going to be stopping to enjoy these photo opportunities, enjoy the beautiful slot canyons, you know, take some time to rest under the shade of a Joshua tree. Definitely good to bring hiking sticks with you, just because we'll have some uneven terrain, but we will have some hiking sticks in the vans as well. And certainly do what you feel comfortable with. But most of the hikes on this trip are fairly low key, and certainly I think most people should be able to do it. So certainly feel comfortable doing this trip, you know, if you're used to a fairly moderate to active lifestyle. Will we see wildflowers? So big question I usually get. The best opportunity is to go on one of our March departures. If there's some good snow and rain in the California desert, the wildflowers can come out in Death Valley and Joshua Tree. Can never guarantee wildflowers, unfortunately, kind of like most regions of the United States, but you never know what you're going to see. That's kind of the excitement of going on one of our spring departures. In the fall, we have the trees and the flowers are kind of coming to their end, which also brings some beauty because of just the unique way that the Joshua trees kind of go through their whole season, as well as some of those wildflowers actually can peak out in the fall, depending if they get some late summer, early fall rain. So hopefully we'll see some flowers, but never a guarantee, unfortunately. What are the average temperatures on this trip? We do go in, that March and November timeframe, as I mentioned, so you have cooler temperatures. So by ranging from like the low 50s to maybe around 80 each day throughout each of these parks that we visit. So certainly some layers in the mornings, as you can see from the photo on the bottom, when they're trying to capture those photos, because it can be a little cool in the mornings, especially when the sun hasn't quite peaked up yet. But we should have some nice temperatures during the day as well. And speaking of weather, a lot of people have some concerns about hot weather, and certainly we'll provide you with a water bottle at the beginning of the trip. Make sure we have plenty of water in the van so you can refill those water bottles. Definitely recommend bringing a good hat for this trip and some sunscreen, but we'll also have some sunscreen in the van for you as well. But certainly we'll be trying to do most of our activities during the cooler parts of the day. And if you want to stay a few extra days, because we're going to be starting and ending in cool places like Las Vegas and Palm Springs, certainly if you give us a call or shoot us an email, our adventure travel consultants definitely have some great ideas for things that you could do to add on to the beginning of your trip or the end of the trip. So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Hopefully you can join us in Joshua Tree and Death Valley in 2022. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, just shoot us an email or give us a call. Happy to have a discussion with you about this trip. So I hope you have a great day, and thanks for joining Austin Adventures on this presentation about Joshua Tree and Death Valley.